And hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of Groendyke Transport's Let's Talk Facebook Live event. Let's see, we've done three before these. I did the first two. Holly McCormick did the next one. And we're going to try today to see if we have any new questions from the field. Looks like the background there, is that the Liberal terminal? Yeah, nice picture of that terminal and green grass. So, let's see. I think we'll see if we have any questions come in, and I might touch on a few things while we're waiting for that. One is I'm sure there are still questions about the vaccine mandate. Uh, we don't have a lot to talk about yet, although we do know that OSHA is the regulatory agency that we've been told will be in charge of enforcement. I think the question is, will there be any legal challenges? I think almost certainly there will be. There are discussions about the 100 employee limit. Should it apply to companies that are only over 100 employees or all companies of any size? What are the state's rights in this question? And those are all valid questions. Personally, I think it might be a federal overreach, but I also, as I said in the video that came out last week, I think we could be a little bit cautious about being upset about it. The real enemy here is COVID-19, and the quicker we get past COVID-19, the quicker we all get back to our lives, normalcy, where we can do the activities we want. We don't have to worry about people getting sick. We don't have to worry about face masks, things like that. So I'll be curious to see how this turns out, and it's been a little bit quiet since that came out. We've had a lot of talk among trade associations like the American Trucking Association, National Tank Truck Carriers. I've talked to other executives at trucking companies. We don't know yet what the requirement would be for testing if someone's not vaccinated, who pays for the test, how often the test has to be administered. So those are all open questions. If we're required to do it, we'll do what we have to comply and make sure that people understand we're trying to keep everyone safe. But that's about all we know at this point. Any questions come in yet, Matt?
Yes. So we have one from Joe Fashing.
Joe Fashion. Hi, Joe.
He wants to know if anybody misses him.
I miss you, Joe. I would imagine a bunch of people miss Joe. Joe, you were high energy and did a lot of good things here at Groendyke. I hope you're well. I hope your family is well, and that everyone stays safe and healthy.
And then we've got one other one asking if we hire drivers from South Africa.
Not yet, and I don't think that'll ever be a large number, but there are programs for certain types of visas to bring skilled workers into the United States. It's a very lengthy process, and I'm going to tell you at just kind of a high level what I know about it. Holly knows more about it, but there is a process to go through that it has to be a country that we have an agreement with. We have to make sure they can read, write, and speak English, and they understand the work, and they have certain skills that can be translated into a job in the United States. And then they have to go through some training here specific to truck drivers. They have to go to a truck driving school if they're from South Africa, learn to drive on the right side of the road, not the left side of the road. And they have to be interviewed and then have a sponsor company that they will stay with for, I think it's a year or 2 years. It's probably 2 years. So it's a long-term thing, but it's also a small number. And at this point, I don't know if we'll ever get any applicants. I know there's a lot of interest, particularly because it's so hard to fill tank truck driver jobs in the United States. It's a high demand skill set, and there just aren't enough in the United States. So I think it's worthwhile. You know, our country is founded on immigrants, but I think we want the right immigrants with the right skills to come in that can do a job, do it safely, do it professionally.
So, not necessarily a question, but a comment, roughly saying that this particular person knows of people who have been vaccinated who have still gotten the virus, and also added that, which is good to mention, that it's not a requirement to necessarily get the vaccine, but a requirement to either get the vaccine or to go through the regular testing. And if you wanted to address any of that.
You know, I'll comment on. I'm not an expert. I do have a science degree, so I can speak to some of this a little bit, but don't take me as an expert. From what I've read, it's still a very high number of people without the vaccines are most of the infected that are hospitalized. Uh, Very few people have died that have been vaccinated. I don't know if the percentages have changed. The last time I looked at some numbers was back in June, and it was about a 93% to 97% of people in hospitals were unvaccinated at the time. You can get an infection if you've been vaccinated. It's called a breakthrough infection, I believe, but it's generally not as serious and doesn't last as long. I don't know about how long in between intervals for testing. I've heard 1 week or 2 weeks. I think we're waiting for guidance on that. Also, I read this today and I brought some information with me because I was curious about it. The recommendation is still, even if you've had COVID and have antibodies, the vaccine will raise your immunity. And there's more testing to go on, and sometimes it takes a certain amount of time to have a validity test that will show this for certain. But the opinion based on test results now is if you have had COVID, you should still get the vaccine because it will raise your immunity. Think of it like kids. Kids do develop natural immunity from getting diseases, but vaccines actually make the immune response stronger in children and be the same in adults. Did that cover all the points you were asking about? Here's the chart. I think this is fairly recent, and it shows worldwide just the staggering number of cases of COVID and how many we've had in the United States, how many deaths. And this was interesting. I read just today that we have about the same number of deaths in the U.S. The 673,000 number is now about 675, as were recorded during the Spanish flu of 1918. What's interesting about that is I think that there probably were less records kept very accurately back in 1918. It was really from 1918 to 1920. And the other amazing thing to me about this is I would have assumed with the amount of medical care advances we've had in the last 100 years, we could have less deaths in this country than we had back in 1918 and 1920. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to moralize about it, make a judgment on it. It's interesting to me that the number is very close, and actually the United States has surpassed the count that we officially had from the 1918 Spanish flu. And it was called Spanish flu not because it came from Spain, but it was people coming back from World War II battlefields that were sick in Spain brought that back. So it didn't originate there, but I believe that's where it was believed that soldiers were coming back from there. They had it coming from the Western Front in Europe. The other thing I want to point out here that's, I think, important, I believe in the vaccine, I believe in science, and you can see this is a very well-tested vaccine. Almost 6 billion people, that'd be 6 billion doses have been given around the world, most of those in Western countries like the United States and Europe, and 384 million doses in the U.S. And it is true that 2 of the vaccines are still have partial approval from the FDA, and the only reason they're not fully approved, Pfizer is because a certain amount of time has to pass before they can absolutely grant full approval from the FDA. So I think the vaccines have proven themselves. Another interesting fact that you might find interesting is most of the reactions to any vaccine, not just the COVID vaccine, but measles, mumps, rubella, all those things happen almost immediately after the vaccine is given. Very rarely are there any reactions after a week or 2. So if there are going to be reactions to the vaccine, people will get it pretty quickly, and it's a very low occasion of people getting sick from these vaccines.
We have a few questions here on this topic. I'll throw a couple of them to you. One is, will our employees have the option to test rather than getting the vaccine when all this is said and done? And the second one is a question of, do we get our information on all of this from actual practicing doctors?
I'll deal with the first one. Yes, my understanding of the mandate is that will be the option. You can either be tested or have proof of vaccine status. And I think after putting that out first, I suppose that could change, but I don't think they would change that. I think it's more of how they're going to test, what kind of test. Is it the PCR test or is it going to be a quick test? So I don't expect that to change. I think that they'll just tell us the frequency of testing that will be required if someone is not vaccinated. On the second question, it was where do we get our information?
Yes.
We're relying mainly on the CDC. Um, I don't know if Holly has talked to any doctors. I've talked to doctors, and I'm on a school board that we actually use doctors to get information and get advice on how to keep the school safe. But I don't know if Holly has any doctors that are directly talking to. Now, we have a relationship with our provider for our health plan, Blue Cross Blue Shield, which has lots of doctors, and we get information from them and from Cottingham Butler and Dillingham Benefits that both help administer our health plan. So I think we have good expertise for questions that we can't answer, but I think the preponderance of what we relied on has been the CDC.
One more along these lines. If an employee has received the COVID vaccine and has their card, do they still have to do the testing weekly?
I don't know that I understand the question. If we have proof of vaccination status, which I think HR has asked to, so we can have it and prove it if someone needs it sent somewhere to a shipper or consignee, I don't see why they would need to be tested if they have proof that they were vaccinated. I would follow up with Holly if that's not clear enough, but I think as far as we've been told and what we expect is if you can prove you had the vaccine, you've got the card, that should be sufficient. You shouldn't have to be tested. I would add, I guess, I don't know how long this would go on. If the pandemic doesn't fizzle out and we're still doing this a year from now, there may be an interval where they say, okay, it's time to revaccinate. I don't think that's very likely, but we'll just have to see. I didn't think it'd go on this long. I didn't think we'd be facing another round of infections.
We do have several other questions if you want me to.
On COVID?
No, not on.
No, yeah, let's, other questions.
Sure. So one person is asking what we haul and what our trucks are governed at.
Our trucks are governed at 65 miles per hour. We haul all kinds of things that go in tanks. About 98% of what we haul are hazardous. So if you see the picture behind you, those are old, probably looks like early 60s, late 60s trucks that were hauling gasoline or something that was flammable. So we haul things that are flammable, combustible, elevated temperature, poison or inhalation hazard, corrosive, so acids and things like that, oxidizers, products that shouldn't be allowed to get into waterways because they'll poison fish life or marine life or aquatic life. But predominantly, we haul hazardous materials. And it's not the same as hazardous waste. What we haul are new products that are going into either petrochemical or oil uses, fuel uses, things like that. And they're placarded so that there's a system where if there's an emergency response that's needed, an emergency responder, firefighter, policeman, what have you, can look at the placard and look in an emergency response guidebook and see how that product should be handled. I would say the nice thing about the professionalism of Groendyke people and how we do things is there are rarely incidents with these products. They're very safe. The trailers are very safe. They have a lot of safety features. For example, this kind of trailer behind you is an old gas trailer. The newer ones are similar but updated. They have an internal valve and an external valve so that if the external valve is broken off, you've still got a secondary valve that holds the product in there. These trailers have bulkheads in between those compartments. They generally line up with about where you see the ribs on the trailers. And chemical trailers have pressure relief valves and vacuum breakers. So if you're unloading the trailer and you forget to open the dome lid, you don't create a vacuum and suck the trailer in, so that vacuum breaker opens and lets air come in so that you don't get a pressure gradient in the trailer. So there's a lot of interesting technology on the equipment we use and a lot of training that goes into being a hazmat tank truck driver. That's why drivers that do this are considered cut above general freight drivers because of the slosh of the product in there, all the valves and things that have to be operated on a trailer, and just the general driving habits you have to haul hazmat. That's why I think we'll be one of the last types of driving, if ever, that goes autonomous because of the hazard of the things we haul. We want the serious people that really know how to drive and handle these rigs to be the ones behind the wheel.
CW has a question that follows somewhat along these lines. So
ICW?
Yeah. He's asking, besides our typical recruiting techniques, what other strategies are we employing to gain skillful drivers?
Well, I've been giving out little pink T-shirts that say "Future Groendyke Trucker" to little girls because I think we need to get more women driving in the tank truck industry. You know, CW, I think that's a great question, and I can't tell you I've got the answer, but I think we've got some ideas. One is I'd like to see us recapture the imagination of people that like the idea of working with big equipment, like the idea that what they supply as a part of this job is something that's so important to the economy of the United States. And the fact that there's so much technology in our trucks today. Can you pop up that Freightliner picture that we have? If you just compare the trucks that are behind me now on this slide to the trucks we have today, there's just no comparison. At the front of this truck, if you look right above that license plate, there's a radar that is constantly looking out ahead and trying to assess the threats around it. You know, we have cameras down both sides. I think this truck has them on both sides of the truck looking backwards down the sides. We have collision mitigation that if a driver doesn't see that they're closing fast on an object, the brakes are going to apply whether the driver does or not, and it will assist the driver or completely brake the truck to a stop. So that's just one example of how cool these trucks are today with the amount of technology they have. You know, you look at the onboard telematics that we have. You look at the wide base tires and the air systems that you can see on that trailer. It's got a little loop sticking off the hub there where it'll air up the tire if it starts to lose pressure. My whole point here is I think we should be telling young people today how cool this job is, how much technology they're going to interact with, the fact that they're in one of the safest sectors in any kind of industry, and it's a great job and it's going to pay well, and they don't have to get a college degree. They can have a college degree and decide they want to do this. They can still see the world if they want. But the other thing that has kind of been one of the harder things for trucking has been the lifestyle. Well, that's just not really true in most tank trucking applications. Our drivers, we call them over-the-road drivers, are home about every 3 nights on average. Now, some are gone longer if they want to be. The red team can be gone up to 11 days, 12 days. But this is a job where you can make a really good living and balance being away from home and seeing the United States and being home pretty regularly, like I said, every 3 nights. So I just think it's something where we have to reframe the discussion around trucking and not some of the negative stereotypes of the past and talk about how cool it is to be in this industry and think of all the products we haul and what they go into. I remember when I first came into this company, I was fascinated to understand that we hauled the propellant that went into Scott's Liquid Gold that you used for wood polish. It went into the sneakers that I wore. It went into the paint that I painted my house with. It went into the lenses on cars and baby diapers. We haul the fuel that the stealth bombers use to fly out of Whitman Air Force Base. So I just think it's fascinating how many things our industry is enmeshed in throughout the United States, and our people are helping to drive the economy of the United States. So CW, that's just kind of a partial, I think, idea of where we should try to get people from. It is a different group of employees today. You know, 30 years ago, we had people come from mainly agricultural backgrounds. They operated heavy equipment. They operated tractors and farm equipment. So translating into driving a truck was pretty easy. I think there are a lot of different avenues to go. I heard just the other day some people were talking about kids in inner cities that never get a driver's license, so they never really think of a driving career. Can we help them, as an industry, not just Groendyke Transport, learn to drive and open an opportunity for them where otherwise they might not even think about a career in transportation? And that's just the driving jobs. You know, talk about the technology on the trucks. What are the engines going to be? What's the energy that's going to power trucks? What kind of artificial intelligence options are going to be out there for planning loads and for managing all the information that it takes in a very complicated business like hazmat trucking. So there are a lot of different layers of jobs that I think will still be relevant for a long time that are in tank truck specific to what we do.
Raymond Fritz is asking, what sets Groendyke apart from other hazmat companies?
Oh boy, I think a couple of things. First thing comes to mind, Raymond, is we're recognized, and I'll say this without any hesitation, we're considered by most people that I know in the industry, whether it's customers, regulators, or competitors, to be the safest tank truck company out there. And that's not an opinion, that's fact, backed up by safety award after safety award after safety award. It's backed up by drivers. I think we have 440 or 450 drivers that have been inducted into the President's Club since its inception. We have over 100 drivers today that are still active in the President's Club, which means they either have at least 1 million miles without a chargeable accident or preventable accident, or they have at least 10 years, and they can have 1 million miles, 2 million. I think we have 2 or 3 today that have 4 million miles. And that's 4 million miles with Groendyke Transport. We don't just accept someone's word that they drove someplace else and had millions of miles. Those are with Groendyke Transport, so those are verifiable. We have drivers with 10 years, 20 years of non-preventable accidents, or they haven't had any preventable accidents. So safety is a hallmark of what we do. I'll tell you one of the other things that I think is most important, and this is in the DNA of Groendyke people, is if we say we're going to get something done, we get it done. If a customer gives us a load and it becomes a problem, we don't stop and say, well, we're not going to make money on this load, we can't do this. We tell a customer we're going to do it, we get it done. So our word is our bond, and our people deliver on that every day, 500,000 times a year, and in a variety of circumstances. I think a third thing that sets us apart, without a doubt, is training. We have, when new employees come to Enid, or they now do it on Zoom, get trained by us, they tell us, bar none, we have survey after survey after survey. We do it after every class. They tell us our training is the best they've ever had. So they leave here feeling equipped to do the job and understand the challenges. And then we renew that training and try to make sure they understand what they're doing. Fourth thing is right behind you, you can see this equipment. I think we have some of the best equipment on the road. It's well maintained. We have a great team from the time we spec the truck, so we specify what's going to be on it, to whenever it retires and we bring new trucks in. We get great equipment and we maintain that equipment well. And consequently, when we sell our trucks at 5 to 6 years of age, we get high dollars because the people that buy them are repeat buyers. They want to buy trucks they know have come out of our fleet because they know they're reliable and they can put them into service in whatever they're doing, and they know they're going to be a good piece of equipment. You know, I could go on. I think the pride factor of people that have been in this industry, and certainly Groendyke Transport, we're recognized as being a thought leader in the industry. A lot of companies like to know what we're doing. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. A lot of people like to know what Groendyke's doing, and they want to emulate our success. And I think that's a great list of things that I think set us apart. I'd say the last thing that comes to mind, and I could probably come up with a bunch if I sat for a while, is I still think it's something to be family owned. To me, it's a slice of Americana, or the American way of life, that we come from one person that started the company in the depths of the Great Depression in the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma, 1932. I can't imagine a more difficult time to start a business, and it has grown to be in the top 10 in its class in the United States, and we're in the top 100 trucking companies in the United States. We survived deregulation, and that was a big switch. I think last time I looked, there were 4, 5, maybe 6 companies that existed prior to 1980 when there was regulation to when the trucking company was deregulated. Interstate deregulation knocked a bunch of companies out because they didn't have the skills to compete in a free economy. And we're one of the few that made that transition from regulated days under the ICC to deregulated days, which we have today. So we made that switch, and we're still successful. And I think that's from having a lot of things. A little bit of luck doesn't hurt, but I think having a family-owned, long-term focus, which is what the Groendyke family has had for 90 years. We'll be celebrating our 90th year coming up this next year. Those are all strengths to this company, and I feel really blessed to have those.
We have one question that's been asked twice.
Okay.
Why doesn't Groendyke pay sick time to drivers?
Sick
Sick
time?
pay.
Oh, sick pay?
Yes.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a good answer other than we have, I think Holly has been looking at personal time off, which is kind of a new way of looking at, you just get a certain amount of time off, sick time and vacation time. I don't really have a good answer for that. I'll ask her to address that on the next Let's Talk.
And that is.
I guess let me come back to that. I think it's one thing to talk about what we don't do. I think it's another to talk about what we do. We pay well. We provide good equipment. We provide professional training. We have a 401k. We have a benefits plan that I don't really even like to hear people complain about the benefits plan. I spend so much time on it because I want people to have good benefits they can afford. We've had some of the lowest premium increases of anybody that I know of in the last 5 years. So while we may not provide one thing, we provide a host of great things to make it a great job. And I'll tell you a story. When I first came to work here, I was at a terminal we had in Beaumont, Texas, and I had a driver telling me all the things we didn't do. He figured I was up from Enid, and he was going to tell me all the things that we stunk at. And he said, well, my last company, they did this. Well, my last company, they did this. And I finally, and I was about 28 or 29, working in Central Dispatch at the time, and I said, if the last company did all this so well, why aren't you there? And he said, well, they went bankrupt. I said, look, I don't know if that's why they went bankrupt, but we're doing things where we're trying to make sure we have all of this stuff covered where you have a good job, you know you're going to have work, you know it isn't just when you're ready to pay, you're going to make enough money every week, you're going to have good benefits, you're going to be able to retire from this job by having 401k. We try to do all those things and have a sustainable business that can go on and keep taking care of people, creating jobs, and taking care of customers. And that's the objective we have. Is there any one thing at a company that somebody else does better than us? Probably, but I would stack us up, and we do this. We compare ourselves and benchmark ourselves to other companies and say, overall, we're a great place to work, a great place to have a career, hopefully a great place to retire from. And I hope everyone thinks that way, that they want to retire when they're ready, and they can afford to.
I've got one more question at the moment. John Generu.
Now, John?
And he is asking, would GT be interested in promoting a Veterans Employee Resource Group? He says he's actually put together a presentation explaining a program, and he says his wife works for a reputable company there in Jacksonville that had great success with it.
So I'm not sure what that means to have a Veterans Resource Group. Is that maybe, John, is it Jonathan? John. Maybe, John, you could send something into Holly. You know, we've done a lot of outreach to veterans that are leaving the service and looking for a job, and I have felt for a long time that it's very clunky the way they have to be processed out from their last duty assignment. I think if people have served in the military, as a country, we owe it to them to just make sure there's no gap in employment. They don't have to worry. They can go straight to work, have benefits, and be taken care of because of the sacrifice. And I say that because my dad's a veteran, both of my brothers, one's still active duty. I had an uncle in Vietnam. I've had several parents that were veterans. I was born in Berlin, Germany on an Army base. I am a naturalized U.S. citizen, but I was born overseas, and I understand what it's like to be in a military family. My dad retired from the service whenever I was I was a sophomore in college. So I'm not sure what the resource is you're looking for, if it's support after they get out, if it's employment resources, but if you would, send something to Holly, and let's see what that's about. I'd like to know more.
And he said he's going to send her that tomorrow, so.
Excellent. Okay, thanks.
We got one more that just came in. Bobby Platt.
Bobby.
Is asking if you've ever done a ride-along with a driver on a load.
Yes, I've done that many times. I haven't done it in probably, I gotta stop and think. It's probably been at least 5 years. But yes, I've done ride-alongs with drivers. And I used to ride along, it's going back a ways, when I was in Denver in the shop. I was the guy that would go load, we call it slop gas, but it's transmix at the loading rack in Denver, trucks would come through that were headed towards Texas, and they were going to go to the Three Rivers refinery to take transmix from the pipeline down there. And so I would take the drivers out there, and I had a card, and I would load them. That happened every day when I worked there, but I've been on loads that were longer than that, not overnight, in probably 20 years since I've been on an overnight trip. I assume he's going to invite me to go on a trip with him.
He did ask if you would be interested in going on a ride-along, but I don't know if he was actually referring to himself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually think it'd be helpful for a variety of people to go and ride along. And I would tell you, it's, spending some time in somebody else's shoes is beneficial just to know what they go through. But I don't think that that's the only way to find out what it's like to see what someone else's job is. If we're good communicators, we can explain what some of the challenges are. And I think that's an important way to look at it too.
We did get another question going back to COVID-19, saying that Groendyke used to pay for being off due to COVID, but we've stopped and would like to know why.
I don't know what we did when people were off or if we stopped. So
we'll take that one offline.
yeah, I think that'd be a question to ask in a GTO town office.
Yeah. That's all I've got.
So I've got a couple of things that I just think are kind of funny. It's no shock. I've told people I think they should get the vaccine. So some of the people that say they don't know what's in the vaccine, I find that kind of funny because I think of all the things that we eat and do. And so I looked up, and some of you will know what this is. I just want to read the ingredients of this food item that people eat and think about the argument that we don't know what's in the vaccine. Ingredients: enriched bleached wheat flour, reduced iron, B vitamins, niacin, thiamine, mononitrate, B1, riboflavin, B2, folic acid, water, sugar, corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, partially hydrogenated vegetable and or animal shortening, soybean, cottonseed and or canola oil, beef fat, whole eggs, dextrose, contains 2% or less of soy lecithin, leavening, sodium acid, pyrophosphate, baking soda, cornstarch, and monocalcium phosphate, modified cornstarch, glucose, whey, glycerin, soybean oil, salt, blue raspberry concentrate, mono and diglycerides, polysorbate 60, cornstarch, sodium stearoyl, lactylate, natural and artificial flavors, sorbic acid to retain freshness, blue 1, blue 2, potassium sorbate, xanthan gum, cellulose gum, enzyme, wheat flour, yellow 5, red 40, contains wheat, egg, milk, and soy. Before I say what that is, has anybody sent in what it is?
No.
It's what every growing boy needs, Twinkies. Anything else?
Nope. It's gone quiet.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody signing in. How many people did we have? Have any idea?
We had us in the 60s
Okay.
as a top.
And then people come back and watch the recording later. Well, I hope people do that. I hope this is valuable. If it is, please let us know. And I don't think we always expect to have a ton of questions. We had a lot, obviously, on COVID. Hopefully, we'll also talk about business and looking forward past COVID at some point. I can understand why COVID dominates the conversation right now. But I hope we can continue to do this so that people feel like they're getting some insight about what we're thinking up here, and we also hear what you're thinking and questions that you have. And if we can't answer it, like some today, didn't know the answer to it, we'll see if we can find out and continue to have this conversation. So thank you very much for your attention. Hope you have a good rest of the evening and a good week.